Hello, everyone. My name is Veronique Blanchard, and I am the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection Municipal Assistance Coordinator, or MAC, for Western Mass. I am delighted to welcome you to today's webinar, which is part of the MassDEP's Recyclepalooza series of webinars that we are holding all week to celebrate America Recycles Day, which of course was Sunday. As I'm sure you're all aware, purchasing products with recycled content helps to foster a closed loop by creating a market for the materials we all recycle. You know, as recycling professionals, we tend to focus on how well our residents are actually recycling, but not so much on creating a demand for the very materials we are recycling. That's what this webinar is all about. And by the way, today's webinar is being recorded. Our team today includes Todd Koepp, who's managing the technical aspects of the webinar behind the scenes, and Janice Perret, who will be keeping an eye on questions coming into the chat. We also have the rest of the MACs attending today and helping out, and I have to say they are an amazing team. Our lineup of speakers today includes Cathy Doodnauth, Environmental Analyst with MassDEP, who will discuss the Sustainable Materials Recovery Program, or SMRP, and the grant program criteria on buying recycled, as well as how to get ahead of next year's grant program requirements. Next, we will have Julia Wolfe, Director of Environmental Purchasing for the Massachusetts Operational Services Division, or OSD, who will give us a thorough understanding of state contracts, how to search those contracts for items which contain post-consumer recycled content, and why calculating and using full cost accounting when making purchases is so very important. Last, we will have Lynn Rubenstein, Director of Northeast Recycling Council, or NERC, give us a quick presentation on the Government Recycling Demand Champion Program. By the end of the webinar, we hope you will come away with important information about why purchasing materials with recycled content is so important and how easy it is to make those purchases through state contracts. A couple of housekeeping items before we begin. Most of you are likely familiar with Zoom meetings at this point, such as the chat function, which is located near the bottom, near the center at the bottom of your screen. Please place any questions or any technical concerns you have there, and Janice Perret will be checking the chat for us and responding to you. We will also be posting links of interest in the chat, so keep an eye on that. If what shows up in your Zoom screen is a phone number, we ask you to please change that to reflect your name. We'd like to know everybody who's here. To do that, hover your mouse over the top right of your picture, or black screen as it is, click on the three dots and come down to rename. And during the presentation, you can also change the view on your screen. If you hover the mouse between the speaker and the presentation, there'll be two little gray lines. If you click on them, you can change the size between the two to suit your own preference. You will have noticed by now that you've been muted and your video turned off. We have set the meeting this way for security reasons. If for any reason we have to close out the meeting, we will begin it again immediately, so please rejoin us. This webinar is being recorded and the presentations will be sent out to everybody after the meeting. So if you miss a link or want to have this information on hand, it will be sent to you later on. So now, without further ado, let's get started. We're here to discuss buying recycled. So our first question for you is whether you know how old your policy is. Todd, can you call up the poll for us, please? And what we're looking at here, yep, is just to see if you know when it was created. Okay, we'll give it just another couple of seconds. All right, Todd, how about if we close out the poll and you could share the results with us? All right, so it looks like about 55% of folks don't know what year it was created, and about 34 do, and some of you don't even know what it is, which is great because I'm really glad you're here because that's what we're talking about. So if you are unsure, if your policy is rather old, we recommend that you look at the sample of a model buy recycled policy, which Janice will be posting in the chat for you. You can look that up on the online and see what we recommend as a model. And so let's see, Todd, let's see, can you close out the poll? There we go. And you can also see from this chart that Todd will show for us right now that most of the buy recycled policies were set in place around 1997, 98, 99. It was part of a grant requirement back then, and very few of them have been updated. So now's a really good time to begin thinking about how to improve your policy and make it more robust. So another important point, please do keep in mind that a buy recycled policy is the actual document which states the intention of a municipality to purchase products with recycled content. So it's the actual bylaw or regulation. Then there's an annual notification of this policy, which is a different kind of document, and that is the part of the criteria for applying for a SMRP grant. Okay, so now, without further ado, let's move on to Cathy Doodnauth of MassDEP for her presentation on the SMRP grants and some news she has to share with everyone about how to make your life easier for next year's grant applications. Take it away, Cathy.
All right, thank you, Veronique. I'll just wait for Todd to get the slides up on the screen, and then I'll get started. All right, thank you, Todd. So hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Cathy Doodnauth. I'm an environmental analyst with MassDEP, and I'm the program manager for the Drop-Off Equipment Grant and the Curbside Recycling Carts Grant. If you're familiar with our Sustainable Materials Recovery Program, or SMRP grants, then you may have heard of the Overview and Certification of Minimum Eligibility Criteria form. If not, this is the first form you must submit to access the other SMRP grant applications. Today, I'll be talking about one of the requirements of this form, the annual notification of buy recycle policy. Next slide. So before a municipality can apply for a SMRP grant, they must first submit the minimum eligibility criteria form. This includes attaching one of DEP's requirements to be eligible for a grant, which is the annual notification of buy recycle policy. The DEP requirement is twofold. Municipalities must have a buy recycled policy in place and send the notification of that policy to department heads. The notification is an annual reminder that there is a policy in place and that products made with recycled content should be purchased when possible. To be clear, the annual notification is not the same as the actual buy recycled policy. Instead, the notification must be the communication that was sent to staff, either as a memo or email, as a reminder that the policy exists and that purchasing these products can be beneficial. It's important to have a buy recycle policy in place and not just to be eligible for a grant. By purchasing materials with recycled content, we're supporting the work that we all do. The policy also has economic and environmental benefits, and our other speaker, Julia Wolfe, will discuss that in more detail later on. Purchasing those products with recycled content helps to close the loop, which I'll talk a little more about. Next slide. So the diagram on screen shows the system for many municipalities in Massachusetts. A quick run through, we can start with consumers purchasing products from retail stores and food establishments. After use, the product is put in the recycling bin. A hauler takes the recyclables to a materials recovery facility or MRF to be separated by material. The materials are baled and sent to a processing facility to be manufactured into a new product, now made with recycled content. That product is sold and purchased again at a retail location, and the loop continues. So this is the closed loop recycling system. Municipalities across the state are working on improving recycling in their communities. You help to close the loop by choosing to purchase products made with recycled content, as the material you're working hard to collect is the feedstock for manufacturers to make these products. Next slide. So now I'll get into what a good example of what the annual notification looks like. So DEP will accept either a memo as a Word document or PDF, or an email as a screenshot image or PDF. Either of these formats is fine. The notification must be dated within the current fiscal year, but prior to the grant deadline. So essentially, the notification for the next grant period could have gone out between July 1st, 2020 and the first week of June 2021. The notification must be sent by the Chief Executive Officer or the Chief Purchasing or Procurement Officer of the municipality. And finally, the notification must discuss the importance of buying recycled. This annual memo or email is to remind your staff that buying recycled has many benefits that support the hard work you do in your recycling programs. We're expecting the municipality to emphasize that importance for staff in the body of the memo or email. And if you want to view more examples after this webinar, we have a few up on our SMRP webpage, which Janice will be adding to the chat. Next slide. So here we have an example of an annual notification from the town of Reading. This was the memo notification they submitted for the Muni 21 grant period that closed on June 10th, 2020. And I'll go through why this is a good example. First, it's a memo, which again can be submitted as a Word document or PDF. Second, the memo is clearly addressed to department heads. Now, this part can be left as department heads, management, or it can be the individual names. Next, the memo came from the town manager. And this is important to include so we can verify it's sent from the CEO or purchasing officer. Next, the date. The memo is clearly dated January 27th, 2020, and it's acceptable because it was within the fiscal year and prior to the grant deadline, which again was June 10th. Finally, the content in the body is great. For example, the end of the first paragraph says, we need to focus on completing the recycling process by purchasing products made with recycled materials. This emphasizes closing the loop and why buying recycled is important, and so it's a great example of what we're looking for. The town of Reading's notification is one of the examples up on our website if you want to take a further look later on. Next slide. So here's another good example. This time it's an email format that was submitted as a PDF, and I'll run through again why it's a good example. So again, it was attached as a PDF, but we can also accept a screenshot image. It's dated within the fiscal year. So I think it's May 19th, 2020. And this was also before the grant deadline of June 10th. It's addressed and sent to a management contact list within Rockport, as noted under the date. The email was sent by the town administrator, AKA the CEO of the municipality. And finally, the content is great. The email talks about why buying recycled is important to support the recycling work being done throughout the state. In my next slide, I'll be going over an example of a bad annual notification that would not be accepted. So next slide, please. So this is the example of an unacceptable notification. It's a recreation of notifications I have reviewed in the past. This example does not meet our requirements and would be denied. And this is why. There is no date included in the screenshot since not the entire email was captured. And we require the date to verify whether it was sent in the correct time frame or not. It's unclear who the email was sent to because sometimes the sender BCCs recipients and we can't verify that it was sent to department heads. Sometimes signatures aren't included and it takes time to verify the sender was a CEO or purchasing officer. Here we see that the title is included, but sometimes we just don't see it. And sometimes it can be sent from the recycling coordinator, which would be unacceptable because we require it to be from the CEO. The content, AKA the one line of body text. We understand that municipalities are incredibly busy and that there are a lot of moving parts to the SMRP grant applications. Although this line mentions that there's a buy recycled policy in place, it doesn't focus on the importance of that policy or touch on why buying recycled supports the work you do in your recycling programs. So this content needs to be more meaningful. Since this email is missing many of our requirements, it will not be accepted. We also cannot accept the actual buy recycled policy in place of the annual notification. If the policy itself is attached and not the memo or email communication, it will be denied. The process for after denying an annual notification can be time consuming for myself and the staff person that submitted it. Basically, after I review and find the notification unacceptable, I reach out to the staff person that submitted the form on retrack to let them know. I then delete the attachment and open up the form so they can reattach the correct one. But it can be a long back and forth before the right attachment is submitted. Next slide. So that being said, both the staff person and myself are incredibly busy. And so to respect your time and my own, we hope to streamline this process for the upcoming grant period. We recommend that municipalities send out the annual notification in the new year. In the past, we received a number of notifications that are sent out in January as part of the municipality's New Year message. This is a great time to send it out because it's within the necessary timeframe that will be accepted. The new year is a great time to remind staff to purchase products with recycled content or to set it as a goal for the year. And it's early enough that you get it out of the way and don't have to worry about it during the grant period. Many municipalities submit their minimum eligibility form and grant applications on the day of the deadline. Please try not to wait until the deadline, because if you submit the notification at the last minute, it leaves less time for you to submit the correct one if there's a problem. I review these as they come in, and submitting the form late can impact your ability to complete grant applications, leading to a scramble to get it all in before the deadline closes. So to completely avoid this potential headache for the Muni 22 grants, we're asking that you send out the notification as soon as you can. Once you do that, if you send me the annual notification by January 31st, 2021, I can review, approve, and attach the notification to the form before the grants are even open. This will be one less thing you have to worry about when the grants do open. You can get this out of the way now, way ahead of time, and save yourself the hassle in June. So again, try to send these out and then send to me by January 31st, 2021 to my email, which is on screen, and I'll attach it to the form so you don't have to worry about it later on. Next slide. So to quickly touch on the biorecycle policies themselves, 55% of the participants on this call responded that they don't know when their policy was developed. Well, DEP keeps track of the municipality's biorecycle policies. After going through our records, I found that over 87% of what we have on file has not been updated since the late 90s. And it's over 20 years ago now. It doesn't sound like it's a long time, but it's been a while. So with that, we ask that you consider updating your biorecycle policy. We have a model policy online on our SMRP webpage that was already sent into the chat. And don't forget, you can reach out to your MACs with any questions. Another option is a sustainable purchasing policy, or SPP. Remember, reduce and reuse come before recycling. We're looking at materials management in a more sustainable, holistic approach. And one way to do that is to have a sustainable purchasing policy. So we're also encouraging municipalities to look into this alternative, which includes purchasing items that benefit the environment in general. Please note that if your muni does adopt an SPP in place of a biorecycle policy, that's okay, as long as it contains a section on purchasing products with recycled content. And know that we will accept an annual notification of this policy as well. Julia Wolfe of OSD is up next, and she will discuss an SPP in more detail. Next slide. So that's all for me, and here's my email address again if you have any questions about the annual notification of biorecycle policy as a SMRP grant requirement, or if you sent out your notification and you're ready to get it out of the way so you don't have to worry about it in June or April. Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Cathy, for that information. And I hope all of you out there will take advantage of this early bird special and getting your annual notifications attached to your grant application ahead of time. Janice, are there any questions in the chat for Cathy?
Sorry, I was trying to add the link again. No, there were no questions for Cathy, which is surprising because I know she will get them in June. But I wanted to remind people that you can put questions in the chat box, and you can also scroll up and see whatever you might have missed. I will again put in the PDF for the biorecycle policy since someone just asked, but just remember that if you have questions, that's where you should put them.
And just as a reminder to everybody, there is a difference between the biorecycled policy itself and the model for that. Janice has posted in the link. There's also models for the notifications. So those are two different things, just to make sure you keep that clear in your head. And it's the notification that Cathy will be looking for, not the policy itself. All right, so thank you. And before we get to Julia Wolfe's presentation, we would like to find out how many of you actually do purchasing in your municipality. Todd, could you call up the next poll first, please? All right, so we're just asking if you actually do any purchasing or not, just to see, you know, how many of you on this webinar are in charge or do actually do it personally. All right, we'll give it another couple of seconds here. I promise we won't do you in with lots of polls. We only have 3 and this is our second, so. All right, great. So Todd, if you could close out the poll and share the results with us. Perfect. All right, so it looks like, wow, 61% of you actually do purchasing, which is great. We're so glad you're on this webinar. 39% don't. And so what I'd ask those of you who don't do the purchasing to do for us is to pass on the information you get from this webinar with your chief procurement officer so that you can, they can help support purchasing of products made with recycled content. All right, so now we can close out that poll. And by the way, if you don't know how to do it on your screen, you just go up to the top right little X there, it turns red, and then you can click it off your screen. Okay, so next up, we have Julia Wolfe, who will lead us through the state's environmental purchasing policy, or EPP, and will tell us about what products are available in the state contract. So take it away, Julia.
Great, thank you. Good morning, everybody, and thank you to MassDEP and the Max for inviting me to speak today about sustainable purchasing. So as you know, I'm Julia Wolfe. I'm the Director of Environmental Purchasing for the Operational Services Division. And next slide, please. I am super excited to be part of your Reduce, Reuse, Recycling Palooza this month. I love that title. And all of the great programming that you guys have available to support America Recycles Day. And I love that it's a whole month of learning, which is fabulous. I always appreciate working with DEP folks. I actually worked there many years ago in the solid waste and recycling program on the commercial side. So really happy that we've stayed in touch and continue to coordinate on a number of different issues. Next slide, please. So I'm going to give an overview of the Operational Services Division, or OSD, where I work, and what we do and my role. And because a condition of receiving funding from DEP is to have a buy recycle policy, they asked me to go over this. But I just want to point out that in my role, I don't actually work directly with municipalities to develop policies, but I did reach out to a number of very knowledgeable folks about, you know, and was able to pull together a whole bunch of information, guidance, templates for you all that I hope will be helpful. So many communities who have had buy recycle policies are transitioning them to sustainable purchasing policies. That encompasses much more than purchasing recycled content products. So that is what I'm mostly going to focus on today, with buy recycled being sort of a part of a larger policy. So a key to a good sustainable purchasing program is to be able to access products and services that will meet your needs. And we at OSD, we've done a lot of work, and we've done a lot of work for you. So I'm going to review how to find environmentally preferable products in statewide contracts. We have about 55 contracts with environmentally preferable products and service offerings, which equates to thousands and thousands of products to choose from. So one contract alone, our FAC 85 environmentally preferable cleaning products contract, that one has 16,000 products on it that are all EPP. So that's just sort of an example. Then I'm going to go over the contracts that we have that have recycled content materials in it, just for you all. Next slide, please. So OSD, we're the state agency that establishes and manages statewide contracts. It also includes the Office of Vehicle Management, the Surplus Property Program, the Supplier Diversity Program, and we manage everything to do with ComBuys, which is the Commonwealth's online marketplace and document repository for everything we do with purchasing. So there are about 110 statewide contracts in 16 different categories. And I believe that over 1.9 billion in purchases have been made through the contracts in fiscal year 20. So just to point out, we don't buy anything, but we set up the contracts for our eligible users to use, of which municipalities are one of them. And the benefits to using statewide contracts is that we do all the work to research and develop the specifications. We facilitate the sourcing team to develop the request for responses. We bid out the contract, we award the vendors, we manage the vendors, and we collect data from the vendors. So as a municipality, you all are able to use our contracts without going out to bid, and that's a big deal. So there are really a lot of benefits with using statewide contracts. And just to point out, we're always looking for municipal involvement on our sourcing teams, which gives you the opportunity to help shape the specifications of the bids to help fit your needs. So reach out to me if there is any interest. And we've had an EPP program over the last 25 years. So we're one of the longest standing programs in the country. And how we differ from other states is that the director, myself, I'm actually a member of the Strategic Sourcing Services Group in the procurement program, as opposed to other states where the EPP person actually resides in the DEP sort of equivalent. Next slide, please. I also administer Executive Order 515, establishing an environmental purchasing policy for the Commonwealth, and it was signed in 2009. And this policy directs departments to procure EPPs when they're readily available, perform well, and represent the best value for the Commonwealth. I also co-chair the Toxic Reduction Task Force, where we really try to identify products with toxics on the contracts and look for alternatives. So we did a lot of work with green cleaning products over the past 10 years, and I really truly believe that our work has contributed to the acceptance of green cleaners across the country. I heard that green cleaners now make up 30% of all cleaning products in the industry. So I love hearing that. Next slide, please. So I wanted to introduce you to our local government enablement team. This team of 4 is there to help you with anything OSD. They can help you find products or services you need on contracts. They can walk you through how to purchase them. And if you're using combis, they can provide you all assistance as, you know, anything you need to place your orders through the system. So they're kind of like the MAC equivalents, right, at OSD. So if you think of it that way. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to level our sort of definition of what EPPs are, because there's a lot of greenwashing out there. For example, vendors use the term environmentally friendly. I don't know what really that means, but I do know what it means if the product has recycled content or is less toxic, is energy efficient or refurbished, for example. So if you hear vendors saying, oh, it's friendly to the environment, I would always push back on their environmentally friendly claim. But EPPs are products that have a lesser or reduced effect on human health and the environment when compared to competing products that serve the same purpose. So in the bubbles, you can see sort of what I mean on this slide. Next slide, please. So when considering EPPs, the most important considerations are price, whether it works, so the performance of it, and whether it's available. I also encourage you to consider the full cost of the product in order to identify the best value. And in Massachusetts, OSD, we're a best value state, and we're not required to go with the lowest price. So we're looking at best value. Next. So full cost accounting or life cycle impacts include the inputs, what happens with the inputs, and then the outputs. And sometimes EPPs, they have a higher upfront cost, but they may be cheaper over the life of the product. So it's really important to identify the true cost in order to identify the best value. Next slide, please. So some of these costs could be including disposal costs or hazardous and solid waste after the life of the product, or your hazardous management costs, which would be reducing or eliminating if using a low or non-toxic product. And also reducing energy and water costs through more efficient equipment or choosing products that last longer. And also products that reduce health and safety impacts to workers. And these are just sort of some to name a few. So the question I'm asking is really, what are the costs of not taking action to purchase EPPs? Next slide, please. So I highly recommend speccing products with third-party certifications, and these third parties verify environmental claims, they make sure products work, and that comply with the safety, health, or environmental standards or requirements. If the requirement is a third-party certification, if it's what you're looking for, procurement departments like them because then they don't have to evaluate the claims. And quite frankly, many folks in the procurement departments, they may not have the expertise to do so. So these are some that we spec in our contracts. Next slide, please. So I also wanted to make the link here to climate action planning, and that reaching out and making connections to your climate folks, because using many environmentally preferable products has a direct impact on carbon reduction. Next slide, please. So I talked briefly about the different types of policies. There's buy recycled, which is single attribute, buying recycled. And then there's sort of your green purchasing or environmental purchasing, which looks at environmental and economic aspects. And then there goes all the way to the sustainable purchasing, which also incorporates the social benefits. But you know, these policies only work when they meet cost and performance requirements. Next, please. So three pillars to sustainable purchasing include sort of economic, environmental, and social benefits, which I highlight in this slide. But also there's so many more benefits, such as leading by example. And I really believe that that is very, very important. But it also helps departments figure out policy goals and determine the infrastructure, support those that are already doing it. And you'll be surprised, there are probably a lot of folks that are already doing it in your communities. And last, like here in Massachusetts, it enables you to qualify for grants and awards. Next slide, please. So if you're just talking about buy recycled, some of the benefits include, and of course, you guys probably all know this, closing the loop, and increasing diversion of materials to provide feedstock for making products. But also, I just want to point out that municipalities, you receive many types of funding to enhance diversion and may want to consider this in the full cost accounting of product purchases. So if you're diverting all this paper to feedstock for new paper, think about whether this might be communicated to purchasing departments and whether it could be part of their consideration in choosing recycled content. And I also want to point out, I have had some municipalities say to me that they can't purchase recycled content paper because they're required to take low bid under 30B. And I always point out that if you spec recycled content and you choose low bid, then you're meeting the requirements. So it all depends on what policies you have in place. And also, you're always able to use statewide contracts. You know, I'm going to get back to that all the time. But we've done a lot of this work for you. So there are some great things on statewide contracts. All right, next slide, please. So I have a lot of information on this slide with multiple links, and I spoke with two national organizations who've been working together to advance environmental purchasing. One organization called Safer States, and then another, the Ecology Center. And they've come up with these 4 focus areas in their EPP roadmap. So the first is really foundation building, knowing what information and resources are out there. And I've listed our EPP program, but also the Sustainable Purchasing Leadership Council, which is a nonprofit that I'm a member of. And they work with public and private entities on sustainable purchasing. So I highly recommend checking them out and perhaps becoming a member. They actually have a lot of resources available and a number of local government members. Also, the Responsible Purchasing Network with Alicia Culver. I've done multiple projects with her over the years. She is really an expert in public sustainable purchasing. And then third-party certifications, as I spoke about earlier, but also making connections, as I also spoke about earlier, with your municipal sustainability directors. Then there's creating a policy, and I've included some model policies here and guidance. And the buck stops here guidance is very robust and walks you through many of the steps to sustainable policy development. Then once you have a policy in place, how do you implement it? And of course, one way is to draw off of OSD statewide contracts, or there are many resources in the EPP roadmap that you can find for doing that. And lastly, successful programs have training, goal setting, and ways to measure annual impacts. Next slide, please. So some of the guidance referenced in the previous slides also identified some common statements that I often hear, such as, it's going to cost more to buy sustainable goods and services. And as I've gone over, if you consider the life cycle and total cost of ownership, it may not. And focus on large contracts and piggyback on existing contracts in place, such as statewide contracts. Another comment I hear is sustainable products are not effective. And I encourage folks to spec third-party certified products a lot of the time, and perhaps initiate pilot programs with departments to test products out before they use them to show them that they work. Others say that sustainable procurement takes too much time. And yes, there is upfront planning and rollout takes time for sure, but once you have a program in place, it becomes part of the whole framework. And then lastly, there aren't enough sustainable products and services available. And I think you'll find that, you know, as I said before, we have thousands of products on statewide contracts, and there are many other cooperatives out there that you all have access to as well. Just make sure that you're asking for environmentally preferable offerings. Next slide, please. So just to quickly go over some of the best practices to setting up a program. So create a multi-departmental team, mostly to get buy-in and have those impacted by a policy as part of its creation. Identify the most relevant policy drivers. Is there a climate action plan already? Do you have a sustainability goals already? Then conduct a sustainability spend analysis, working with procurement to identify those categories that have a significant environmental, health, and social and/or economic impact. So, do the products use a lot of energy? Are they toxic and have an impact on worker safety? Are there contracts where you could draw from more local or diverse suppliers? So review contracts to find opportunities and develop a plan that focuses on high spend, high impact, easy to implement, and likely to have multiple sustainability benefits. So also always encouraging innovation. And there are new, asking whether there are new innovative processes or products that can help achieve the departmental goal, such as implementing a managed print services contract or leasing equipment instead of buying equipment. Next slide, please. So here are 3 model programs that I had found. The City of Santa Monica, which came up with a number of easy buying guides, and I think they're really good. So definitely check those out. Washington, D.C., they developed specifications for multiple products that buyers needed to use and include. They needed to include in the solicitation documents. It also has reporting templates and training materials. And then there's Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I'll talk about that next. Next slide, please. So Ann Arbor has an interesting program, and I found the following tips to be helpful. They developed a policy through a multi-departmental working group, which was signed as an administrative policy or procedure for the city. So the policy has clear guidelines for what factors are considered in products and services acquisitions. They use third-party certifications, no greenwashing, and they require consideration of short-term and long-term environmental and financial costs and benefits. So it states clearly that products need to perform adequately, have competition, be competitively priced, and available in the time frame that they need. And just pointing out again that the policy, for it to work, it really needs to include any fiscal concerns. So they identify clearly what each program responsibilities are between their procurement department and the sustainability office and others. And there's an effort to find out sort of the highest purchased item and provide recommendations for EPP replacements. And what I thought was interesting is that they actually require purchasing managers to justify why they're not buying an EPP instead of trying to justify why they would be buying an EPP. And they are required to provide a policy update to their environmental commission on an annual basis. Lastly, they're able to use existing staff and interns to develop and implement a policy. So that, I thought that was very interesting. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to jump into how to find environmentally preferable products on statewide contracts. So we compiled something called the EPP Products and Services Guide, which you can find on the OSD's EPP website, and there's a bunch of information on there as well. So it's divided into products and services, and as you click into the guide online, you can choose different products or services, which brings you to full descriptions of that product or service, why we determine it's EPP, and if there are third-party certifications, and then how to find them in the contract. Then it also has a link to the appropriate contract user guide, which are the buying guides for the contracts. So note that we also have a downloadable PDF that you can use as well. Sometimes people find that easier, but it's online or in a PDF. Next slide, please. So there are a lot of EPP products. These are all of the products that we have listed, and I'm just, just to show you that there's a lot of them. And then next slide, please. And then we also have a number of environmentally preferable services that we consider environmentally preferable on our contracts. Next slide. And I was also asked to provide some information on OSD's surplus property program, and all state agencies must use this program to distribute surplus products. And municipalities have the ability to purchase products from the list after 30 days, which basically gives the option to the state first, but then to the municipality after. Next slide. And here's an example of, I just did a screenshot of a recent list and the pricing. And I was looking at it, and the weight room rack really looks like a good deal at $10, which is the first thing. So this is just an example of what we have right at the moment, but it changes all the time. So definitely check that out. Next slide, please. So I was also asked if we had reused, refurbished, or opportunity to lease equipment on our contracts. And yes, these are the contracts that have opportunities. I've included all of the links to the contract user guides. And if you have questions about the particular contracts, I'd recommend that you reach out to the contract managers, and their names are clearly identified in the guides. If you're not getting what you're looking for, I'm always a contact. You can always reach out to me as well. Next slide, please. So because many of you are still working with buy recycle policies, I went through and identified all of our contracts with products containing recycled content. So my advice to you is, when looking for recycled content products from our vendors, reach out to the vendors. And all the contact information is in the contract user guides, and ask them for recycled content options and pricing. Often you can just send them an email, but the directions are different for each of the contract user guides. So this is our list of office supply, clothing, and grocer contracts. And you can see the types of products they have available, and many of them have recycled content. So the first contract, OFF 47, is our office supplies, recycled paper, and envelopes contract. And we do require that all the vendors on this contract only sell a minimum of 30% post-consumer recycled content copy paper. And if you check out the EPP Products and Services Guide, you'll actually see the recycled content specs for many of the products on this contract. So that's always a great place to go and look for what the specs are, is the EPP Products and Services Guide. Next slide, please. And here's our IT and vehicle contracts, which have available products with recycled content. And then just reiterating again, just make sure that you're asking for products with recycled content. Next slide, please. And these are our facility contracts. We have a bunch of them. So they're all over the place here. And I have embedded the links to the contract user guide in all of these. So when you get a copy of this presentation, you can just click on it and it'll bring you to the right place easily. Next slide, please. And these are also facilities contracts. They come from the maintenance, repair, and operations contracts, which are really large. And they have companies like Fastenal, MSC, Grainger, Noble. But on FAC 105, we also have included a number of hardware stores. So we've been working with the larger vendors to make sure that they're providing proper labeling in their websites on what environmentally preferable attributes the program has, so that you can sort by green, or in many cases, you might be able to sort also by specific certification. So we've been working on that kind of nationally with a number of different programs. Next slide. At OSD, vendors are required to provide us quarterly vendor reports, and I've been working with the contract managers over the years to collect environmental data regarding the products and services that I'm able to measure EPP spend and calculate environmental benefits on some of the products and services. Next slide, please. And this is an example of the measures that I consolidate each year. And this is for 2019. So we try to boil it down to these 4 measures just to really make it easily readable. Next slide, please. So just another plug for the EPP webpage, which has really a lot of information. And I highly recommend that you sign up for our quarterly newsletter called By the Way, where every couple of months it comes out, and I try to include articles about EPPs. And also, just a last plug for a sustainable purchasing video that we just posted, which you can share with your communities. It's a 8-minute video, and it has a lot of good information about sustainable purchasing. Next slide, please. So that's my presentation. And I always like to end my presentation with this quote, that every time you spend money, you're actually casting a vote for the kind of world that you want. Thank you. Next slide. And that is it. So here's my contact information and some helpful links. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you so much, Julia, for giving us so many tools to use to procure products with recycled content. I know there's a lot there to take in. Julia has basically provided a handbook for us to refer to. And just to remind you, we will be sending out all the presentations with the links later. We do have time for questions. Are there any lined up in the chat?
There are no questions in the chat.
No questions.
Anybody? I'm surprised. Nobody seems to be chatting or typing anything in the
Arlene?
point. Oh, it says I get pushback on recycled content copy paper because it jams.
Yeah, so I've heard that, and that is, from everybody that we've spoken to, there's no difference between regular copy paper and recycled copy paper. So if that is the case, if they're having an issue with a particular brand, I would reach out to the vendor and say, hey, this is jamming. Can we try another one? So that's usually the recommendation that I make, is make sure that you're talking to the vendor about it. But what we found is that it's not really any different than, regular non-recycled copy paper. It's just trying a different brand. So that's what I would recommend.
Okay, and then I got another one. It says, how do you implement this in a very small town?
Yeah, so, I do recommend taking a look at the resources that I provided. And the playbook also has a lot of information for cities, but, I know that it's often sort of one person who's the CPO and the dog catcher, right? It's like you're doing everything. Um, but I think what's really important is to make sure that you have a policy and you have buy-in from folks. Because if you're just developing a policy and sending it out that doesn't have any teeth to it, you're probably, it's not going to, you may not get sort of what you'd like. So for very small towns, I think it's trying to work with any of the other departments to come up with something that's going to work for all of you.
So a little bit more information for this, Julia, is the original poster said, purchasers have their vendors that they have dealt with for years and they are comfortable with them and they are apparently not comfortable making change. So I think I've heard that before.
Yeah, that is, we hear that all the time. And I think that if, you could start with statewide contracts, get some quotes for different types of products and compare and provide them and compare them to what folks have been using for a long time. That's sort of the first step, is to receive quotes and see whether or not you can sort of get better deals, and look at, we have prompt pay discount on our contracts. We have, we work with a lot of diverse suppliers. So there are a whole bunch of other things, not just the bottom line purchase price on our contracts. And so I highly recommend reaching out to one of our LGE folks, and having a conversation with them, because perhaps you could find a couple of products and, we could work with you guys to get quotes on those types of products, and being able to provide them. So that's sort of all I can recommend at this point.
Okay, that's great. So I have another question. Is there any suggestion about tracking the sustainable purchase policy implementation? Sustainable purchasing policy.
So tracking. So I usually recommend that, you target just a couple of products to start off with, right? Maybe up to 1 to 3 products that you're going to focus on, and ask your vendors to provide you the information and the spend on that. So you can really work with your vendors to make sure that they're providing you that information. That's what we do. We require quarterly reporting from our vendors. So I would push that back to your vendors to get that information, but only start. If you don't have a program already, start with just a couple of products and do them well, so that you can, have success right away, and be able to sort of market that success. And then that leads to perhaps looking at other types of products.
Okay, so I have another question. Challenge I've found with SWC is getting the spreadsheets with prices. What's the secret to access them? Can you make them easier to find?
I would recommend reaching out to the LGE program on that. So every single contract, we have 110 statewide contracts, and they're all different. really. They're all totally different. Pricing is different. Sometimes it's a discount off of the MSRP. Sometimes it might be, a percentage above that the MSRP. Sometimes it might be particular pricing by product. So pricing varies by contract. So there's no one size that fits all for this. So I would recommend reaching out to the LGE folks, and they can help you figure that out. That's what their job is to help you figure out pricing for all of that stuff. So if you have a question about pricing, please reach out to them. That's what they're there to help you with.
I think that probably answers one question, which is, we are busy and our purchasing people are busy. What's the easiest resource to which I may refer our department purchasing people to help them make better choices? Would you say that's the LGE contacts?
Yes, I would reach out to the LGE contacts. Absolutely.
Okay. And then any suggestions on which products to target as start for easy wins?
Yeah, we have been talking about buy recycled, but I'd actually recommend targeting products that have energy, like computers, electricity, that have electricity, because what you're going to find are, real savings there. So focusing on EPEAT, computers, certified computers. So computers with different certifications.
Okay, great.
That's what I would recommend.
And you're okay with us sending out a PDF of your presentation, right?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Stuff. Okay. And then I had one more question. It says, do products with post-consumer recycled content, such as toilet tissue and toweling, potentially save towns money? We want to close the loop, and cutting down trees to make toilet tissue is not sustainable.
There's so much toilet tissue and paper on many contracts out there. So it's finding, the products that are going to meet your needs. And there are recycled content toilet tissue that is very competitive in price. So I absolutely would focus on that as well.
Okay. And then there's also some chat, I'll just read this, regarding the copy paper being problematic, and basically was talking about storage makes a difference. So if people are curious about that, just like scroll through the chats, and people have made some helpful suggestions. And then some other helpful suggestions for easy wins, like wipes, rags used by DPW, paper. So that's pretty much all we have right now. And I know you have another meeting, so maybe we should let you go.
That's all right. Well, thank you very much, everybody. It's been my pleasure. And if there are any questions, feel free to reach out to me. You can send me an email. That's the best way to get in touch with me. And I'd be happy to guide you to where, more information.
Okay, thank you so much, Julia. This has really been wonderful, and we really appreciate your time and help.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Okay, everybody. So for our final poll of the day, we'd like to find out how we can be of further assistance to you in making purchases of recycled products. So if Todd could call up the final poll first, please. I see there we go. Okay. So please check all that apply anywhere that, you might think that you need help in being able to make purchases of recycled products. We'd like to know what you're thinking and what we can do for you. So I'll give it a few more seconds here. And I just want to make sure that you all know that, your MAC will also be reaching out to you to follow up on the results of this poll. And again, if you're not sure who that is, Janice has posted the link to the MAC list in the chat. And I'd say that's pretty good, Todd. Could we go ahead and close it out and share the results? All right, so it looks like most of you, which isn't surprising really, would like a price comparison. So that's good to know, but basically everybody's checking off everything. So thank you for sharing that. We are going to, the Max again, like I said, we'll reach out to you afterwards. And also don't forget to reach out to that local government enablement team. That's a wonderful resource. And that link is in the chat as well. Janice put that there earlier. Okay, so our final presenter is Lynn Rubenstein from the Director of the Northeast Recycling Council, or NERC. She's going to talk about the Government Recycling Demand Champions, which promotes the purchasing of products made with post-consumer content. Take it away, Lynn.
Great, thanks, Veronique. Can I, am I heard and all that? Yep, great, okay. So I have, fortunately, I can speed talk. So thank you very much for this opportunity. I only have a couple of minutes, so I am gonna rip through this. Basically, I really appreciate the chance to at least introduce the concept of the Government Recycling Demand Champions program. And obviously the punchline is I want you to get intrigued and to learn more. So the background is that for many years, the Association of Plastic Recyclers, APR, has had a demand champion program focused solely on the private sector, getting them to increase the purchase of products with post-consumer resin, as well as to make more resin with post-consumer content. And its goal is to foster and build US end markets for post-consumer resin. So we have partnered with them to launch a parallel program that's focused solely on the public sector with a minor exception that we'll talk about in a few moments. And so it's a free incentive program to increase government purchasing of products with post-consumer recycled resin. Of course, NERC embraces everything that Julia said about increasing your purchase of products with post-consumer content in general, but because of the partnership with APR, this program focuses solely on plastic. Our goal is to create and stimulate domestic markets for recyclable plastics and to support a sustainable plastic recycling industry. And NERC is the lead. So in addition to all the great work that Massachusetts has been doing, and they really are one of two national leaders on this, government in general is the biggest purchaser of everything in the United States, giant purchasers. What you buy definitely impacts the marketplace. It affects the recycling industry, and it sends that critical message to brands about you're going to buy products with post-consumer resin. We've all seen their commitments, their expression of intent, but quite candidly, if we're not doing our part, they're going to stop. They've got no reason to do this. So we need to act. We need to get government to really step up and start buying. I know, like, go shopping. It's the holiday season, right? And as Julia mentioned, this is leadership. You need to send that leadership message to your constituents and citizens. As you painfully are aware, the cost of residential recycling depends on the value of what gets put in the bin. Without this important draw, without you guys buying products with post-consumer resin, that's never going to turn around. The value of plastic is going to stink, pardon my French. So how do you participate in this program? There's two basic ways. One is as a champion. So you're already buying products with post-consumer resin, and you're going to up that activity over the next 12 months. That's a champion. Advocates say, which is most of you, great idea. I haven't a clue how to do this. And Julia spoke at some length about all the tools and resources that are there to make that possible. This is another one. I wish you'd included me on the list, but there you go. So you say you sign up as an advocate saying, I want to do this. I want to learn more, and I will take advantage of the resources to figure it out. This program is open to any non-federal public sector entity. We have a very broad definition of this. These are examples: state agencies, departments, municipalities, counties, solid waste districts, libraries, public utilities, and the exception to the public only rule is educational institutions, public or private, schools, colleges, and universities. It's a free program. We offer technical assistance and support. We have a director of vendors and products. So this is different than the state contract information that Julia was referencing. This is the kind of product I want. This is who makes it. Here's the contact. Here's this website. And here's where it's on contract. You get a certificate of participation as well as recognition. Part of that recognition is if you sign up as a champion and you do an annually report what you're buying, you will also get an individualized sustainability report. Here are examples of products that we know government buys, that there are readily available products available that have post-consumer resin. And Julia noted the importance of availability and pricing and meeting your needs. So these are categories of products that are out there. Most of these, but not all, are available on Massachusetts contracts. But there's also cooperative purchasing. There's other ways in, and happy to work with you to get there. And you'll see the last one, including electronics. That's the EPEAT stuff. That's what Julia was referencing as an easy way in. Our website has a lot of resources available. These are all hyperlinks that are there, but I'll have the link to our website in a moment, including how you sign up. Those are the commitment letters, incredibly brief Word documents saying, yeah, I want to do it. Here's my contact information. It's really that complicated. Julia referenced the importance of certification. The last link here talks about verifying it. There are a number of companies that offer these third-party certifications, and this is a link to those companies. Here's my contact information. The URL for the program, you get to it from the NERC homepage. It's a project. So it's a government recycling demand champions program. There's actually links in 2 places on our homepage to this. Here's my contact information. Oops, what happened to that? So I had one more slide I was going to show you. We have 2 webinars coming up that might be of interest to you guys. One is on January 13th. We're doing a buy recycle training, open to everybody. You can registration for that is available on the nerc.org homepage. And on January 27th, I will be doing a more detailed version of this, and I will be speaking more slowly. And again, you can register for that on the NERC, find the link to that on the NERC homepage. I don't anticipate that there's questions, but if there are, I'd love to answer them. And again, thank you.
Thank you so much, Lynn, for sharing that with us. Great information. We do have a couple minutes left in case anybody does have any questions for Lynn. I didn't happen to see any in the chat, but Janice, did we have anything?
No, I just put in the nerc.org buy recycle training. What was the date again, Lynn?
The training is on the 13th at 2 p.m.
13th at 2 p.m. And then that was for
On
the
the
buy
20
recycle.
Right. And then on the 27th, I'm going to do the longer Lynn Speaks More Slowly version of this. And that's on the 27th at 2.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much. I know that that's been an awful lot of information for everybody to take in today, and thank you for hanging in there with us. I also just want to take a minute to remind everybody that you can use your recycling dividends program and small scale grant funds for many of the items. That information is posted in the chat, and also feel free to reach out to any of the MACs to ask them questions about that if you have any. Well, I think we're all good for today. So I just wanted to say thank you all so much for joining us. We hope you've come away with a better picture of how to search for products with recycled content on the state contracts, why it's so important, why it's so important to purchase products with recycled content, thereby closing the loop, and how you can get ahead of next year's grant application by sending out your annual notification of your buy recycled policy to Cathy Doodnauth, who will then attach it to your application for you. As always, if you have any questions, you can reach out to the MAC in your district, and we will be sending out the presentations to you as soon as possible. So thank you all, and enjoy the rest of your day.